You know, when we think about structural engineering, there is a there's a very comforting exactness to it.
Oh, absolutely. It's very black and white.
Right. Like if you are building a house, you pour a solid concrete foundation, you frame the walls according to, strict mathematical principles, and you put a roof on top.
Yeah, and it stays there.
Exactly. And if a crack appears in the drywall, an engineer can just look at the blueprints, measure the load-bearing beams, and say with absolute certainty, there is the problem, right there. It's visible, it's measurable.
Because it's a closed system of physics.
Right.
Cause and effect are mathematically linked. You
Yeah.
can map out the exact point of failure with a tape measure and a level.
Yeah.
And honestly, human beings fundamentally crave that kind of clarity.
Mm.
We love being able to point at a problem, categorize it, and just apply a specific torque to fix it.
We really do. But then, you step into the architecture of human relationships and suddenly you have to throw the blueprints completely out the window.
Oh, out the window and into the garbage.
Literally. Because we are looking at a structural landscape that is honestly incredibly murky. You might have a perfectly good foundation, right? Two people who genuinely love each other, who shared the exact same core values,
The perfect setup.
the perfect setup, but cracks keep appearing in the walls anyway. And when you try to find the structural failure inside the relationship, you can't.
No, you really can't find it.
Because the thing tearing the house apart isn't the house itself. It's the invisible weather system battering it from the outside.
Yeah, and psychologists actually have a specific name for this invisible weather system. They call it spillover.
The spillover.
Yeah. And it is the absolute definition of invisible relationship sabotage. Because like you said, we desperately look for the cracks inside the partnership, but the seismic activity causing the fracture is actually happening miles away.
Wow. And mapping out that exact seismic activity, like how modern stress infiltrates and sabotages our connections, is our primary mission for this deep dive today.
It's a crucial mission, really.
It is, because we aren't just here to admire the problem. That doesn't help you, the listener. We are going to build a practical, expert-backed toolkit for communicating, setting boundaries, and mastering what's called relationship etiquette.
Right, to actually weather that storm.
Exactly. And I want to mention, we're relying heavily on some incredible source material today, including a really comprehensive guide called Reducing Stress for Healthier Relationship Dynamics. And we'll be pulling a ton of practical guidance from the Weddizer website, which is just this goldmine for relationship and social etiquette articles.
Oh, Weddizer is fantastic for that.
It really is. Okay, let's unpack this. Before we talk about how to reinforce the walls, we have to look at the mechanics of the spillover effect. Like, what is actually happening when external stress breaches the perimeter of a relationship?
Well, what's fascinating here is the neurobiology behind it. I mean,
Yeah.
spillover isn't just a metaphor, right? It is a measurable physiological state.
Okay, break that down for me.
So when you are navigating a fast-paced modern environment, dealing with, work pressure, crushing deadlines, inflation, just commuting in traffic, your brain's threat detection center, the amygdala, is constantly firing.
Right, it thinks a tiger is chasing you, but it's just an email.
Exactly. And you are accumulating what researchers call an allostatic load. So your body is pumping out a slow, steady drip of cortisol and adrenaline just to get through the day.
So you're essentially in a low-grade state of fight or flight for, 10 hours straight.
Precisely. And the insidious part of spillover is the assumption that when you unlock your front door at 6 p.m., you magically leave that physiological arousal on the welcome mat.
Oh, right, like you just shake it off like a wet dog.
Yeah, but you don't. You
Mhm.
carry that elevated cortisol, that highly sensitized nervous system, right into your living room. And the immediate casualty of that state is your baseline level of patience.
Man, I think the best way to visualize that baseline dropping is to think of it as a stress tax.
Ooh, I like that.
Right. So imagine you wake up every morning with a certain amount of emotional currency in your bank account. Let's call it 100 emotional dollars.
Okay, I'm with you.
So on a low-stress Saturday, you use that currency to be generous, right?
Right.
To listen deeply to your partner's stories, to laugh off minor annoyances. You're rich.
You got dollars to spare.
Exactly.
Uh.
But modern life imposes a brutal daily stress tax. By the time you navigate gridlocked traffic, endure a passive-aggressive email from your boss, and, I don't know, read the terrifying evening news, the stress tax has completely bankrupted your emotional account.
Yeah, you're in the red before you even take your coat off.
Exactly. So you walk into the kitchen and your partner accidentally drops a water glass. On a Saturday, you have the emotional currency to say, hey, no worries, I'll grab the broom.
Because it's just a glass.
Right. But on a Tuesday, when you are emotionally bankrupt, you simply cannot afford patience. So instead of grabbing the broom, you snap, you erupt. Or, conversely, you just freeze them out with the silent treatment.
And this is exactly where the sabotage occurs. Because when your emotional bank account is chronically overdrawn, minor, completely insignificant logistical hiccups rapidly escalate into major existential conflicts.
Oh, totally.
A dropped glass isn't just a dropped glass anymore. Through the distorted lens of an exhausted nervous system, it suddenly becomes a referendum on your partner's competence.
Yes, or a sign that they don't respect the household.
Exactly. You start thinking, they dropped this on purpose because they don't value my time. It's irrational, but your brain believes it.
But wait, this brings up a really difficult diagnostic question for you.
Okay, let's hear it.
If a couple is constantly bickering about the dishwasher or the dropped glass, how do they actually differentiate between a relationship problem and a stress problem?
Oh, that is the million-dollar question.
Right, because if I'm snapping at my partner every day, it's very easy for me to conclude, wow, we are just fundamentally incompatible. How do you know it's the invisible weather system and not a rotten foundation?
It requires looking at the subtlety of the warning signs rather than just the loud arguments. Screaming matches are obvious, sure. But the real indicators of stress-based spillover are often much quieter.
Like what? What are we looking for?
You want to look for insidious behavioral shifts. For instance, emotional distancing. It's not always a fight. Sometimes it's two people sitting on the exact same sofa, completely isolated, endlessly scrolling on their phones.
Oh, the doom scroll isolation.
Right, because they simply lack the cognitive bandwidth to engage. Or pay attention to a sudden transactional tone in your communication.
Transactional tone.
Yeah. When couples are overwhelmed by stress, they stop talking to each other like lovers and start talking to each other like overwhelmed middle managers trying to coordinate a hostile corporate merger.
Oh man, that is so painfully accurate. It's like, did you pick up the milk? Did you pay the electric bill? Hey, it's your turn to walk the dog.
Yes. It's just endless logistics.
Yeah.
When the poetry of the relationship is entirely replaced by logistical data entry, you are dealing with a severe stress problem.
Okay, so recognizing that logistical middle manager tone is the first step.
Definitely.
Because if you can catch yourself mid-argument and realize, wait, I'm not actually angry about the dishwasher, I'm just vibrating with anxiety about tomorrow's quarterly report, you instantly identify the real enemy.
You name the demon.
Right, but naming the enemy doesn't defeat it. So if the stress tax is bankrupting us, how do we stop the immediate bleeding? What is the tactical intervention?
Well, it requires rebuilding the conversational bedrock, specifically by changing the actual mechanics of how you express frustration.
Okay, give me the mechanics.
The foundational strategy here involves a linguistic shift. You have to remove blaming language and replace it with self-reflective statements.
I think I know where you're going with this.
Yeah, so instead of initiating a conversation by saying, "You never help me around the house," you shift the phrasing to, "I'm feeling completely overwhelmed by the state of the house right now."
Okay, I have to stop you right there.
Uh-oh. Pushback.
Massive pushback. Because I hear this advice all the time, and I'm highly skeptical of how it plays out in reality.
Fair enough. Why?
Because using perfectly constructed I feel statements in the middle of a stressful Tuesday evening sounds like absolute HR jargon.
It does sound a bit clinical.
It sounds ridiculous. If my partner leaves a massive mess in the kitchen after I've had a terrible day, I am not going to calmly clasp my hands and say, I feel unsupported by your dish placement.
Right.
It feels entirely unnatural and, frankly, a bit condescending. Does this actually work for real human beings?
I love this pushback. And you're right. It is incredibly clunky at first. Your skepticism is totally warranted because it feels like you're reading from a script.
It really does.
But let's look at the neurobiology of why this shift is fundamentally necessary, regardless of how awkward it feels initially.
Okay, convince me.
Let's examine the word "you" in the context of an argument. When you are stressed and you launch a sentence with "you never" or "you always," that word acts as a verbal missile.
A verbal missile.
Yes. The absolute millisecond your partner hears "you," their amygdala, that same threat detection center we talked about, lights up like a Christmas tree.
Because they sense an attack.
Exactly. They are instantly triggered into a defensive posture. Their brain interprets the interaction not as a request for help, but as a predator attacking their character.
Oh.
At that exact moment, their prefrontal cortex, The part of the brain responsible for logic, empathy, and problem solving literally goes offline.
So they can't even process what I'm actually upset about.
No, they are no longer listening to your underlying exhaustion. They are simply pulling up mental files to serve as their defense attorney, preparing a counter-argument about how they actually did empty the trash 3 days ago.
So the original message, which is just, I am exhausted and need help, gets completely lost in the crossfire of the combat.
It is entirely vaporized.
Huh.
But when you force yourself to shift to a statement, focusing on your own internal state like, I'm feeling completely overwhelmed right now, you completely bypass their brain's threat detection system.
Because I'm not pointing the gun at them.
Exactly. You aren't attacking their character. You are stating an objective fact about your own nervous system. You are expressing vulnerability.
And people react differently to vulnerability.
Wildly differently. Human beings are hardwired at a cellular level for empathy. When someone in our tribe expresses vulnerability without attacking us, our natural biological instinct isn't to defend, it's to comfort and assist.
Oh, I see.
It shifts the dynamic from a courtroom battle to a collaborative rescue mission.
Okay, when you frame it as bypassing the brain's defense systems, it makes a lot more sense.
It's neuroscience, not just HR jargon.
It's essentially conversational judo.
Yep.
You're dropping your own weapon to ensure they don't draw theirs.
That's a perfect way to put it.
But obviously, just changing our pronouns during an argument isn't enough. We have to look at the baseline of the relationship, like how we actually spend our downtime. Which brings us to the concept of quality time.
A very misunderstood concept.
Totally. And again, I have to push back here. Because if my emotional bank account is at absolute zero, the last thing I want to do is orchestrate quality time.
It sounds exhausting.
It does. The idea of putting on nice clothes, going to a crowded restaurant, and trying to be charming sounds like a massive chore. How does a burned-out couple overcome that activation energy?
That is a brilliant point, and it's a trap so many couples fall into. We have been culturally conditioned by media to believe that quality time must be high effort, high cost, and intensely romantic.
Right, candlelight and violins.
Yeah, but when you are in a state of chronic stress, high effort activities actually compound the allostatic load. You're just adding more stress.
So what's the intervention?
The intervention here is to radically redefine quality time as low energy presence.
Low energy presence.
It doesn't require reservation. It might literally mean sitting on the couch, putting the phones in another room, and drinking a cup of tea in silence for 15 minutes.
Just parallel existing, but with intention.
Exactly. It's about the quality of the undivided attention, not the complexity of the activity.
That sounds so much more achievable.
It is, but here is the critical caveat. You cannot offer even low-energy presence if your mind is completely hijacked by anxiety.
Oh, right. Because you're physically there, but mentally you're at the office.
Exactly, which is why individual emotional regulation is a non-negotiable prerequisite for relationship health.
You mean managing your own stress separately before trying to connect?
Yes, we often treat relationship issues as something we must solve together. But if your individual nervous system is vibrating with work stress, you cannot be a safe harbor for your partner.
You'll just electrocute them with your own anxiety.
Basically, you will be physically sitting on a couch next to them, but mentally, you will be drafting aggressive emails to your boss.
I have definitely been there.
We all have. You have to utilize individual mindfulness, whether that's deep breathing, a solitary walk, or just a 10-minute transition period between work and home to actively lower your own baseline stress.
You have to put your own oxygen mask on first.
Always.
I love that concept of a transition period. Just, sitting in the driveway for 5 extra minutes to let the cortisol clear before walking through the front door.
It makes a world of difference.
Okay, so if individual regulation and conversational judo help us stop the acute bleeding, how do we prevent the resentment from building up in the first place?
Right, the long-term game.
Yeah. What does the chronic daily maintenance look like on a random Wednesday?
Daily maintenance relies heavily on 2 specific pillars.
Yeah.
The expression of appreciation and the enforcement of boundaries.
Okay, let's look at appreciation first.
Let's do it. Because it sounds like a platitude, but it's actually a biochemical intervention.
How so? It's just saying thank you, right?
Yes, but over time, the human brain engages in something called hedonic adaptation.
Hedonic adaptation.
Yes. We get used to things. We stop noticing the clean dishes, the paid bills, the folded laundry. The partner's daily contributions become invisible baseline expectations.
We just assume the magic laundry fairy did it.
Exactly. And when effort becomes invisible, resentment breeds. Resentment is the silent rust that slowly eats away at the structural integrity of the relationship.
Oh, that's a good analogy. Silent rust.
But when you actively vocalize appreciation, when you look at your partner and say, I really appreciate that you handled the bedtime routine tonight, you trigger a microdose of dopamine in their brain.
So you're chemically rewarding them.
You are shining a spotlight on their effort, proving that they are seen. It neutralizes resentment before it can even crystallize.
It's preventive maintenance. It costs absolutely nothing, but it stops the rust.
Exactly.
Now, the second pillar you mentioned, boundaries, is where I find things get really counterintuitive.
Oh, definitely.
Because culturally, we are force-fed this romantic comedy narrative of total enmeshment.
The whole you complete me idea.
Yes. Gary Maguire ruined us all. We're taught that true love means spending every waking moment together, sharing every single thought, and having zero separation.
It's a very toxic narrative.
It really is. But from a psychological standpoint, establishing boundaries and demanding personal space seems to be the actual key to longevity.
It absolutely is.
So how does drawing lines and creating distance actually bring people closer together?
It's what we call the paradox of intimacy. The romanticized idea of complete enmeshment, where two people dissolve their individual identities to become a single amorphous couple, is actually a recipe for suffocation and codependency.
Yikes.
When you have no boundaries, you have no psychological autonomy. You become entirely responsible for regulating your partner's emotions, and they become responsible for yours.
Which sounds incredibly exhausting.
It is the fast track to severe burnout. Healthy boundaries are what allow for differentiation.
Meaning?
Think of it this way. Boundaries aren't brick walls designed to keep your partner out. They are white picket fences designed to protect your own internal garden.
Oh, I love that. White picket fences.
They ensure you have the time and space to recharge your own batteries, to pursue your own curiosities, to maintain your own separate friendships.
So you actually have something interesting to talk about when you come back to the dinner table.
Precisely. If you never leave each other's side, you have nothing new to bring to the relationship.
You're just an echo chamber.
Yes. Respecting individuality actually creates the psychological safety and the emotional bandwidth necessary to genuinely support each other.
You know, I was actually browsing the relationship and social etiquette section on the Weddizer website the other day, and
Oh, love Weddizer.
it's amazing, right? For the listener who might not know, Weddizer is this specialized platform that offers incredibly deep, curated articles on relationship management and etiquette. And they framed emotional boundaries in a way I hadn't even considered.
What'd they say?
They talked about the etiquette of the re-entry period.
Oh, that crucial hour after someone gets home from work.
Exactly. That is a highly vulnerable window for most couples.
It's usually when the most fights start.
Right. And the article on Weddizer suggested that it is actually a massive breach of relationship etiquette to instantly unload all of your work anxiety onto your partner the second they walk through the door.
Especially without asking if they have the emotional bandwidth to receive it.
Yes. It suggested a framework where you literally ask for consent. You say, I had a terrible day. Do you have the space for me to vent right now, or do you need 30 minutes to decompress first?
That is a phenomenal example of applied relationship etiquette. And it highlights why platforms like Weddizer are so incredibly valuable.
Because it's practical.
It's extremely practical.
Huh.
Because negotiating those subtle boundaries isn't something we are formally taught in school. Most of us just stumble through it, largely relying on trial and error.
Or unconsciously repeating the dysfunctional patterns we watched our parents model.
Exactly. Which for many of us are terrible models.
Horrible models. And that's why utilizing a resource like Weddizer's article section acts as an ultimate shortcut.
It really does.
Instead of spending 5 painful years trying to figure out how to tell your partner you need an hour alone without making them feel horribly rejected, you can just consult an objective, expertly curated resource. Weddizer provides the actual vocabulary for these complex emotional negotiations.
And crucially, it depersonalizes the friction.
What do you mean?
Well, when you try to negotiate a new boundary organically, it often devolves into a power struggle. Your partner might say, why are you pulling away from me?
Right, they take it personally.
But when you can reference an external objective standard, when you say, I was reading this piece on relationship etiquette on Weddizer, and it suggested we try this decompression protocol, it shifts the posture of the conversation.
Oh, I see.
It's no longer my arbitrary need versus your feelings.
Yeah.
It becomes, let's experiment with this best practice together.
It changes the dynamic entirely. Your teammates looking at a playbook.
Exactly.
But even with perfect, mutually agreed upon boundaries and a whole toolkit of conversational judo, conflict is still inevitable.
100%.
You cannot weatherproof a house so perfectly that it never hears the thunder.
Never.
So, how do we navigate the inevitable storms? When external pressure breaches the defenses and an argument genuinely kicks off, what is the protocol?
The primary protocol is to master constructive conflict resolution. And the most critical tool here is understanding the biological necessity of the pause button.
Okay, this directly challenges one of the most famous pieces of relationship advice of all time: never go to bed angry.
Oh, I hate that phrase.
Right. We are told that true commitment means staying up until 3 a.m., pacing the kitchen, exhausting ourselves, and fighting to the bitter end to resolve an issue before we sleep.
It's terrible advice.
But from what we've discussed about the nervous system, that sounds like a terrible idea.
It is arguably the most destructive piece of pop psychology advice ever normalized.
Wow, really?
Yes, from a neurological standpoint, trying to force a resolution at 3 a.m. when you're furious is essentially guaranteeing structural damage to the relationship.
Break that down for me.
Let's go back to the amygdala and the fight or flight response. When an argument gets heated, your heart rate elevates above 100 beats per minute. Your blood pressure spikes.
You're physically agitated.
Highly agitated. At that precise moment, a phenomenon called diffuse physiological arousal occurs.
Diffuse physiological arousal. Okay.
Your prefrontal cortex, the logical empathetic part of your brain, literally shuts down.
It just goes dark.
It goes completely dark. You are physiologically incapable of being reasonable.
You are operating from the reptilian part of your brain.
Exactly. You are a threatened animal lashing out to survive.
Yeah.
If you refuse to hit the pause button, if you try to power through and force a complex emotional negotiation in that state, you will inevitably say vicious things you cannot take back.
You'll just cause trauma.
You will cause lasting trauma.
So hitting the pause button saying, I'm too activated to have this conversation right now. I need 20 minutes, but I promise we will finish this, allows your nervous system to engage the parasympathetic reset.
Yes. It lets the vagus nerve calm the heart rate down.
It allows the cortisol to clear the system so the adult part of your brain can actually re-enter the room.
Exactly. You have
Yep.
to let the adult back in the room. But there is a second critical rule for navigating these storms, and it involves something psychologists call kitchen sinking.
Oh, I know exactly what this is, and it is infuriating.
It's the worst.
It's when an argument starts over something small like who forgot to roll a dishwasher, and within 3 minutes someone yells, and another thing, you ruined my sister's wedding 3 years ago.
Yes. You throw everything but the kitchen sink into the argument.
Why do we do that? It's so counterproductive.
There is a fascinating psychological reason this happens. It's tied to what we call state-dependent memory.
State-dependent memory.
Yeah. When you are in a state of intense anger, your brain acts like a search engine, filtering for other memories tagged with the word anger.
Oh, wow.
It literally retrieves every unresolved grievance you've ever had with this person.
So your brain is actively sabotaging the current argument by flooding you with past trauma.
Exactly. And why is this so destructive? Because it completely overwhelms the cognitive load of the conversation.
Because now we're arguing about 10 things instead of one.
Right. Constructive conflict resolution requires immense focus. You have to isolate the specific problem and work as a team to solve it.
But if I bring up the wedding from 3 years ago,
Then you transform a solvable logistical issue into an indictment of your partner's entire history. You put them on trial for a lifetime of offenses.
and they feel hopeless, defensive, and attacked.
Exactly. If you actually want to resolve the immediate issue, the past must remain strictly quarantined.
Which perfectly transitions into another vital form of quarantine, protecting the relationship from the workplace.
The ultimate firewall.
Right. Because if spillover is the primary saboteur, then setting rigid boundaries between work and personal life isn't just about time management, it's about relational survival.
It is the establishment of a firewall. Work stress is a constantly flowing faucet.
It never really stops.
Never. If you do not create deliberate structural boundaries, like a strict policy of never checking emails after 7 p.m. or refusing to complain about your boss for more than 15 minutes a night, that faucet will flood the foundation of your home.
You must quarantine the contagion.
You have to.
Okay, so we have built a very robust defense.
We really have.
We know how to quarantine work stress, we know how to hit the pause button during an amygdala hijack, and we know how to avoid kitchen sinking.
All great defensive moves.
But a relationship cannot survive on defense alone. You can't just spend 50 years dodging bullets.
Oh, that sounds miserable.
How do couples actively build a stronger future? How do they shift from merely surviving stress to actually thriving?
This is where we shift to the offense.
Mhm.
And the most powerful offensive strategy is the deliberate cultivation of shared goals.
Now, on the surface, this sounds counterintuitive.
How so?
If a couple is already exhausted by the daily grind, why would adding more work like deciding to train for a 5K together or sitting down to plan a complex financial budget for a trip to Italy act as a stress reliever?
Because it triggers a fundamental psychological shift in the dynamic of the partnership.
Okay, explain that shift.
It moves the relationship from a transactional state to a transformational state.
Transactional to transformational.
Exactly. When you are just managing the daily logistics of survival, paying bills, doing laundry, commuting, you are operating as two separate individuals managing parallel lives.
Right, you're just roommates passing in the hall.
You might be coordinating well, but you are still essentially independent contractors sharing a space. And in times of severe stress, it is incredibly easy for independent contractors to turn into adversaries.
You start staring at each other across the table, keeping score of who did more work.
I did the dishes, so you owe me.
Exactly. But when you engage in a shared, meaningful goal, something that requires mutual effort and provides mutual reward, you completely shatter that adversarial dynamic. You become a unified team.
You physically and psychologically shift your posture. Instead of standing face to face, scrutinizing each other's flaws, you are now standing shoulder to shoulder, looking out at a shared horizon.
Man, shoulder to shoulder facing the future. That imagery is incredibly powerful.
It really is.
It changes the entire energy of the room. If we are trying to save for a house and we get hit with an unexpected medical bill, we aren't fighting each other about the money.
Exactly.
The medical bill becomes an external obstacle that the team has to defeat. We become co-conspirators against the problem.
It fosters a profound sense of mutual reliance. And physically, it floods the brain with oxytocin, the bonding hormone.
Which counteracts the stress.
Yes, it acts as a direct counterbalance to the cortisol of daily stress. It reminds you both, on a visceral level, that you are building an architecture much larger than the daily grind.
But building complex architecture requires high-level skills.
Oh.
Which brings me back to the Weddizer platform.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if you want to proactively build teamwork, you need a playbook. And the final strategy we need to look at is the willingness to seek external guidance before the house is falling down.
And this requires dismantling a massive societal stigma.
What do you mean?
Well, historically, couples only sought relationship advice or read relationship literature when they were in an absolute five-alarm crisis.
Like usually on the brink of divorce.
Yes. Seeking guidance was viewed as an admission of profound failure.
Right. It was viewed as the emergency room.
Exactly.
But utilizing the articles and guidance on a platform like Weddizer isn't an emergency room. It's a high-performance training facility.
I love that comparison.
It's the difference between going to the doctor because you're having a heart attack versus going to a sports physiologist because you want to run a faster marathon.
Beautifully said.
Reading up on social and relationship etiquette on Weddizer is an act of deliberate optimization. It's looking at your partner and saying, we have a really solid team here, but I want to study the film. I want to learn the absolute best plays so we can be even better.
And that proactive, growth-oriented mindset is what truly immunizes a relationship against future stress.
Which leads us to a concept that essentially ties this entire conversation together. It is the underlying philosophy behind every single strategy we've discussed today.
It's the core of it all.
And honestly, it's a phrase that initially threw me off when I first encountered it in this context: relationship etiquette.
Yeah, it's a phrase that carries a lot of baggage.
It really does.
But it is deeply profound when applied correctly.
Right, because when we hear etiquette, we immediately think of performative politeness.
Like white gloves and fancy teacups.
Yes. We think of formal dinner parties, knowing which fork to use for the salad, or how to make polite, agonizing small talk with a stranger at a corporate networking event.
Very rigid, very fake.
But when we look at human behavior, there is a tragic, almost comical irony in how we deploy our manners.
The intimacy penalty.
The intimacy penalty, exactly.
A very real phenomenon.
We use our absolute highest standard of social etiquette with complete and total strangers.
We really do.
We hold doors for people we will never see again. We say, excuse me, if we bump into someone at the grocery store.
We listen patiently to incredibly boring stories from our coworkers without interrupting.
Yes, we bend over backward to be considerate, accommodating, and polite to the outside world. And then we come home.
We shut the door.
We walk through the front door to the person we supposedly love more than anyone else in the universe, and we reserve our absolute worst, most inconsiderate, most feral behavior for them.
That's true. We snap, we interrupt, we leave our messes on the counter,
We stare at our screens while they're speaking to us.
and we excuse it.
Right. We wave it away by saying, well, we are just comfortable with each other. I don't have to perform for you. I can be my true, authentic self.
And this raises perhaps the most vital philosophical question of our entire discussion.
Which is,
How do we draw the line between being authentically comfortable and taking someone entirely for granted?
wow.
The concept of relationship etiquette argues that true comfort should never mandate the abandonment of basic human respect.
So I shouldn't just be a slob just because we're married.
Exactly. In fact, it dictates the exact opposite. Because the closer you are to someone, the more vulnerable their nervous system is to your micro behaviors.
That makes total sense. My coworker doesn't really care if I roll my eyes, but my partner is devastated by it.
Precisely. Therefore, your partner actually deserves a significantly higher standard of etiquette than a stranger, not a lower one.
Man, that is such a heavy realization.
It hits hard, doesn't it?
The people we love most deserve our absolute best behavior, not the exhausted leftover scraps of our patience.
Exactly. Dropping our manners at home is often just a symptom of laziness, thinly disguised as intimacy.
Thinly disguised as intimacy. Ouch.
So when we talk about utilizing resources like Weddizer for relationship etiquette, we are talking about the deliberate, conscious application of foundational consideration.
Okay, what does that look like practically?
It is the active daily choice to treat your partner with the same baseline dignity, active listening, and respect that you would automatically, without thinking, afford a guest in your home.
Just the basics.
Yes, it means saying please and thank you.
Yeah.
It means actually making eye contact when they speak.
Yeah.
It means regulating your tone of voice, even when you are tired.
These sound like such incredibly minor, insignificant micro-interactions.
They are the atomic building blocks of the macro environment.
Wow.
By systematizing respect through etiquette, you drastically lower the friction of daily life. And when you lower the friction, you stop draining the emotional bank account, leaving you with massive reserves to handle the external stress of the world.
So, if we pull this massive blueprint together,
Let's do it.
if a couple actively works to quarantine their work stress,
Right, building the firewall.
if they use conversational judo to bypass the amygdala during arguments,
With the I feel statements.
yes, if they build shared goals to stand shoulder to shoulder,
Turning into a team.
and if they utilize the incredible depth of the Weddizer article section to unlearn their bad habits and master daily relationship etiquette, what is the ultimate structural payoff?
The payoff is a complete transformation of the house.
The architecture is secure.
Yes. The relationship ceases to be an additional source of stress and instead becomes the ultimate impenetrable buffer against the anxiety of the outside world.
It results in profound emotional resilience.
It really does.
The house becomes a fortress against the invisible weather.
A perfect way to summarize it.
To recap this incredible deep dive, we started by identifying the spillover effect and the invisible stress tax that bankrupts our patients and turns dropped glasses into existential crises.
The invisible saboteur.
Right. We mapped out the tactical interventions, swapping verbal missiles for I feel, statements to bypass the brain's threat detection, and redefining quality time as low-energy, mindful presence.
Don't forget the white picket fences.
Yes. We explored the counterintuitive necessity of building those white picket fences, maintaining strong personal boundaries to prevent the suffocation of enmeshment.
And we dissected the mechanics of navigating the storm.
Right, by engaging the physiological pause button.
And avoiding the trap of state-dependent memory by refusing to kitchen sink past traumas into present arguments.
Which is huge. And then we shifted to the offense by adopting shared goals, transforming from independent contractors into a unified team.
Facing the future shoulder to shoulder.
And finally, we uncovered the ultimate unsung hero, combating the intimacy penalty through rigorous relationship etiquette.
Treating your partner better than a stranger.
Recognizing that true love is not an excuse for poor manners, and leveraging the curated wisdom of platforms like Weddizer to ensure our partners receive our absolute best behavior.
It is the realization that a healthy dynamic doesn't just happen to you. It is something you actively, deliberately construct every single day.
And that brings me to a final thought I want to leave you with, you the listener. Something for you to mull over as you transition out of this deep dive and back into your daily life.
A parting gift.
Exactly. We established at the very beginning that a relationship isn't a static structure, like a house poured on a concrete foundation that you can just build once and forget about.
It's not a closed system.
No,
Okay.
it is a living, breathing, highly sensitive ecosystem. It requires the daily active nourishment of deliberate etiquette, intentional boundary setting, and proactive connection.
Constant maintenance.
So, if you truly view your relationship not as a trophy you have already won and put on a shelf, but as a living ecosystem that requires your absolute best behavior to survive the invisible weather of the modern world, how might that change the very first words you say to your partner tomorrow morning?
That is a phenomenal question to ask yourself.
Thank you so much for joining us on the deep dive. Keep learning, keep questioning, and definitely explore the relationship and social etiquette articles on Weddizer to keep building your toolkit.